Welcome to today's podcast, everybody. We've got Dr. Barb with us today. As you can see, if you're joining us on YouTube, I am wearing a sweatshirt because when I take this off, I didn't realize the green top blends into the background and I look like a floating head. So if you're on the YouTube site, you'll see this. And if you're on Anchor, I'm a floating head today. So welcome, Dr. Barb. You're joining us again and you're talking to us today about emotional intelligence. Could you tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do for the people that haven't listened to you before, and then give us a brief introduction on your topic?
Yes, thank you so much, Marie. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited. It's so lovely to see you, and I like seeing all of you. We were kind of giggling before we started because she was a floating head, so it's a good way to start a Monday with humor and levity. I love it. So thank you. I'm Dr. Barb Hewson. People call me Dr. Barb, and I do a bunch of different things. The two main things I do is I'm a leadership trainer and a coach, and I do a lot of work with leaders around self-awareness. That's a lot of the work that I do, kind of deep diving. I was a therapist for a long time, so I have a strong psychology background. So I'm very comfortable digging into emotions, which is something we'll talk about today. And then the other piece of my business is I'm also a family law mediator. So I work with a lot of parents or folks just going through divorce. I work with people with a lot of conflict and just at a really bad place in their life. And I really just try to help them have a smoother, more peaceful transition into the next stage of their life. So.
Would you like to give us a brief overview of the topic of emotional intelligence? Because this is quite an interesting topic and it can also be quite a complex topic. So I'm really interested to learn more about this.
Yes, no, this was so great. So, in all the work that I do with leaders, one of the things that I find a lot is people are uncomfortable with emotions. And the thing that I always say to people is, we all have the same emotions. We're way more than mad, sad, glad. Those are kind of the top three. And so we can all really understand if someone's frustrated, you know what that's like. If someone's angry, you know what that's like. It may present differently for different people, but you understand what the emotion is. But yet we have this discomfort with emotions. And so, the example, since I do a lot of work with conflict, I use that as an example in my leadership work. So leaders who, maybe they grew up in a house that had conflict, as a child, their parents fought a lot, or, they have this ill feeling of just discomfort. And I don't like conflict. I don't like being around it. They're the leader that might say, oh, you guys have a problem, you guys deal with it, and they walk away. Right. And so as a leader, you kind of aren't setting a good example, or you're not being the best role model. So that's why I feel like the emotional stuff is really important. Emotional intelligence, I brought my little cheat sheet because I have a definition on here that I found that I've used for years. It's by researchers Meyer, Solvay, and Caruso in 2000. So this is a couple decade old definition. But emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive and express emotion, assimilate emotion in thought, understand and reason with emotion, and regulate emotion in self and others. So it's all about emotions. It's this awareness. And so the challenge for leaders, or for most people, is if you don't understand your own emotions, it's harder to deal with them and recognize what's going on around you, emotions in others. And this ties in really nicely with empathy, which is something I talk a lot about too. And empathy is kind of putting yourself in someone else's shoes. It's all emotion-based behavior, right? It's really understanding. So the key is a lot of the work, when I worked with kids years ago, and even with leaders now, I have another little cheat sheet I brought along, and this is tomdrummond.com. I found this online, I don't know, a year ago or a few years ago. It's called The Vocabulary of Emotions. And I know there's a lot on there. You can't read all of that. But what he did was he identified happiness, caring, depression, inadequateness, fear, confusion, hurt, anger, loneliness, remorse, and then different levels of that. So this is, these are great words to use. So I'll even have this with leaders, and they may say, oh, I don't know, let's see. Oh, I felt really incapable. Like in that moment, I was feeling really incapable, or I felt isolated. Like I was the only person with this thought at my job. So what I do with folks is I really help them expand their vocabulary. so that we're not just mad, sad, glad. We're not just kind of those three main emotions, but I really help people identify and be able to discuss them, because I think that's a big piece of what's missing is we don't want to discuss emotions. We don't always understand what's going on for us. And when we're challenged by that, again, we're going to have a really hard time seeing what's going on in somebody else. So that's kind of the basis of emotional intelligence, really.
It's quite interesting because it involves not only the leader being really self-aware and understanding what's going on with them, but being able to articulate it and then try and understand what's going on with someone else, and then have the other person be able to articulate that and then be able to speak back to them about it. How difficult can it be to be able to have these conversations?
Well, I think, yeah, that's, an example I think of, the leader who is challenged with conflict, might see two employees going head to head on something. And the leader that's uncomfortable with that might say, oh, you guys will figure it out, and they'll walk away. Right. And so for the employees, they might go, oh my goodness, he didn't help us at all, or she didn't help us at all. Like, we really could use some help, but where did this leader go? They just walked out of the room. Versus a leader that's really good at this and really in tune with what's going on, and the ability to, it might be uncomfortable, but they're willing to go in and, like two employees that are in a head-to-head kind of thing, to be able to say, hey, it looks like you guys are having a little bit of a challenge today. How can I help? Can I be part of this discussion, and maybe I can help you guys problem solve? We can figure out what's going on. Let's talk about how you're feeling about this. You seem like you're really angry. You seem really frustrated. Let's talk about this and see if we can come up with a better way to do something or a solution to this problem. And what that does for the team is it shows, oh my gosh, we have a leader that's listening to us and that's understanding how we're feeling. And, a lot of times I just find people want to be heard, right? And they want to be understood. And if they're having an emotional response, that's okay. And for a long time, emotions were like, poo-poo in the workplace. You don't want emotions in the workplace. Oh my gosh, don't cry. Like, please don't cry, because I don't know what to do with it if you're going to cry. And so to have a leader that really understands that, hey, we can't always leave the emotions at the door when we walk in. Something might have happened at home for you this morning, or, something happened last night and you're still, feeling something about it. Obviously you can't have the whole workplace just emoting and crying and yelling and all of these things all day long. But if you don't deal with this kind of stuff, it builds. And so that's where just really having an understanding of what's going on for people, what's happening inside of me as a leader, what's happening for other people, and to be able to just kind of connect. It's really about connecting and just helping them through. And again, it may not be solving the problem. It might just be acknowledging and validating the feelings, but even that is gold. I mean, that's just huge when that can happen. So I think the challenge is when you don't understand your own stuff, you don't know how to help.
I think even in my working life, things have changed quite a lot. It started off as you need to leave your emotions at the door, and then it became bring your emotions in, but just a little bit. If you've got a problem, you need to say something. And now it's kind of become, if you are a leader or a manager, but you are not really interested in dealing with this problem, send everyone to mediation, because then they can go into this little room and then they'll all come out fine and it will be great. And I'm not sure that any of those ways work. Is there a way forward that is better than this?
I think, the leader sets the stage, right, for the environment, for everything, for how they communicate, how they listen, processes, how things get done. And so I think, again, a lot of it really is, how well is a leader trained? Are they doing that good introspective work, again, to really understand, because they're going to be the best help if they know what's going on for themselves. And so I think, that's, again, a lot of the coaching I do with leaders is really like digging in, like what was it about that interaction with that team that really caused you to go, I don't know what to do, and throw your hands up in the air. A leader I was just talking to last week, same kind of thing, where there's that one person in the group who's always stirring things up, never agrees with anybody. And so I said, well, okay, what is it about this person and how he reacts to things that's triggering you? And so we talked about that and really trying to understand, yeah, you may always have one of those people, but there could be something else going on for them, or, they might be actually bringing up things that you hadn't even thought about, right? That you go, oh my gosh, why is this person always going against the grain? But they might actually have some good points in there. So, openness, having an open mind, being willing to look at other perspectives, that's all part of emotional intelligence. So again, I think, so much starts with the leader and just really understanding, again, it's that awareness of you and it's awareness of what's going on with other people. You're not just there barking orders. You're not just saying, get this, and this done. That's who you are as a leader. You might be, but the most effective leaders are the ones that can really tie in and tap into those emotions that are happening for people.
How much of it comes down to how well you actually know your team, and how, not necessarily how well you get on with them, but how well you understand them as people?
Yeah, and that's a great point too. A lot of what I talk to leaders about too is, are you having one-on-ones? Are you taking time to really get to know people individually? And that's interesting. This one client I've got that I'm thinking about. I worked with him last week too, and he just finished doing one-on-ones with all of his team, and that's something he hadn't done before. And he said, "Oh my gosh, it was amazing!" Like, he gave them all questions and things to think about. And so I said, well, what came out of it for you? What did you learn? What was new information? And he just found that to be incredibly valuable. But the other thing he said was, that took a lot of time. And I said, yes. But I said, the other thing that we've talked about is, people, profits, what's important here. Obviously, as a business, you want to make profits. You want to have longevity as a business. But without your people and without taking care of your people, your business it could struggle, or you may have a hard time. So there's always that whole concept of, your people are your most important asset, and really taking time to get to know them. So if something falls apart in their world, you have a sense of maybe how to guide them or how to help them, or what that person might need to get them back on their feet so they can be an effective and productive employee or part of the team again. So, he just, this one owner of this company, he just said, I had no idea, like, doing these one-on-ones was going to be so effective. I feel like I know where people are coming from, and I have a better sense of where they see the business going and what their role is. And it was simply having conversations with them, something that he hadn't done before. So it's so valuable to just know who your people are.
So what would you say to a leader that had not considered this before and was thinking, maybe I might try this out because it's something that would maybe improve my skills? What would you advise them to do?
Well, I would certainly talk to him about that, the question of how well do you really know your people, and have that discussion, and ask about, we talk about performance reviews, which usually happen once a year. Is that enough, really? Maybe we need to be doing this more often. So that, again, just being able to say, have you had one-on-ones, or even small team meetings? If you have a huge team of people, one-on-ones could take you a long time, but even having small group discussions is super valuable as well. And again, as leaders, sometimes we don't put the time in to do that. So, I kind of challenge leaders and say, how might this benefit you? What good might come out of this if you did have these one-on-ones? Because you might have people doing a job that is not their sweet spot. We want to find what their sweet spot is. And maybe, this person likes doing the data and the spreadsheets, but you've got somebody else doing that's really better at, creating a new product. They've got more creative juices flowing, and this other person just likes numbers and the spreadsheets, but maybe you've got them in the wrong spot. So you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you're really talking to them. So I think just really encouraging leaders to take that time. It's so valuable to just really get to know your team and get to know your people.
I think the performance review as well, as you just mentioned, I think that can be a really awkward time for staff and managers, especially if things are coming out that are unexpected and you're having a talk with them. And then
Yes.
maybe the manager's not understanding the employee or vice versa. How can you make that go a bit better than being so awkward?
That's a great comment. And you're right. Why are they so awkward? Oftentimes they're once a year or maybe twice a year, right? Which is just not that much. And so much can happen in 6 months or in a year. And who doesn't get nervous before their performance review? Because they're like, oh my gosh, this, am I going to keep my job? Am I going to lose my job? Sometimes there's a self-evaluation piece that people have to do. So they do that part. And then they're like, am I writing the right thing down? Maybe the manager thinks completely opposite of me. So if you have them more frequently and more regularly, you won't have those big surprises. So that's the one thing I talk to teams about is, if you're only doing these once a year, why are you doing them once a year? Wouldn't it be better to kind of touch in, maybe once a quarter, if you can do them every other month or even monthly, even if you do them monthly, they could be shorter, just little check-ins. What's going on? How can I support you? Do you need more training, or is there something else that would help you with your job? Then that way too, as a leader, you're ahead of the curve so that there are no big surprises. It's the big surprises come up when you do these once a year and then you go, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was going on. Well, because you hadn't checked in. So I always recommend to people, we have to kind of change our mindset of it's a yearly performance review. Let's do it more frequently. Whatever makes sense for your company, let's do these check-ins. And that way you're connected with your people. When something's falling apart, they're going to feel more comfortable coming to you as well. It's not like you're this big leader I talk to once a year. They're going to be able to come to you and say, yikes, this is what's going on and I need some guidance. So
We did have another guest that talked about performance reviews and said that one of the problems with performance reviews, if you have them every year and you call them a review, is that you're looking back on something that you can't change. So
yes.
that automatically makes people anxious. And like you just said, if you're doing them once a year, then you're getting to a point where as a leader, you're trying to judge somebody on something that you've not really reviewed before. So it's a bit difficult to then come out with an authentic review. So I think that doing these, and even maybe within the one-to-ones, or just scheduling little reviews now and again, and just doesn't even have to be an individual review, it could be a team review. That kind of conversation, I think, leads to a better performance review at the end. Are there any particular kind of emotional intelligence techniques that we need to be aware of when we're kind of having these conversations as leaders?
Yeah. And I think, the great thing about, that's a great question, because it kind of goes back to the languaging or the vocabulary of not being afraid or turned off to talking about how are you feeling? How are you feeling about your job? How are you feeling about this task? How are you feeling about the company? And that's what this leader that finally he finished his one-on-ones and we were talking last week. He said, I had questions about like, how are you feeling about the company? Or what are some things that we could do better? What are some things I could do better, or other support you need? And so not being afraid to talk in emotional language, because again, you're the role model as a leader. And so if you're able to do that and say, how are you feeling about this? It sets the stage, it opens the door, and then people are a little bit more comfortable. So I think using that kind of language is fine and appropriate, because people will hear that and they'll go, oh, well, I've been feeling really frustrated because I don't know how to do these spreadsheets, but I'm trying. And then I miss the deadline. And, all these things happen and you don't realize it because of what? Because of these feelings, these emotions that people are having that aren't being addressed. So just role modeling that. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about the team? How are you feeling about working with Janet? How's that working out for you? How are you feeling about the company as a whole and the direction we're headed? And using that terminology will really start getting people to think in those ways.
These are pretty honest conversations, aren't they? So
Yes.
how can we get over the fear of having these type of conversations, and especially if any of these conversations become conflict based?
Yeah. And again, I always bring it back to the leader. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's working with the leaders to helping them with the comfort of all of this, right? If we're, again, conflict's my favorite example because we all have conflict. If we're so averse to it, or it gives us a stomach ache, we're going to have a harder time guiding employees through their own stuff. So for leaders to really get the support they need to help them with that whole, how are you feeling about things discussion, it kind of normalizes it, I think. And so, it's okay to be afraid of emotions. We all have a past, we all have history, we've all had bad things happen. And, as a result, we fear things, right? We don't want to cry at work, or we don't want, to have a blow up with Bob over here over this issue. So fear can drive us to not take action. And so working through, like, what are you afraid of? Like, what are you afraid might come out of this? If you were to ask someone how they're feeling, are you afraid they might say, I hate you and I hate this company? Well, that could happen, but that's a real thing. That's a real reaction that's happening for someone. And wouldn't it be helpful to know that? Because then we know then we can dig into that and figure out how to deal with it. It's the unknowns that, that's the things with emotions, is there's a lot of unknowns unless we talk about it. So
that would kind of form my next question, because if you are asking people, how do you feel about such and such, and they say, well, actually, I do not like your leadership style or something like this, and they have to feel able to have that conversation with you as a leader, and then you as a leader need to be able to deal with that comment in a non-aggressive, non-defensive, non-conflicting manner. That to me seems like a very difficult situation to be in. How can we navigate that for both the employee or the team member and the leader?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite techniques, again, is kind of acknowledging and validating feelings. And I like to describe, I have like two different examples. Everybody's kind of in their own little bubble in a way. And so if this employee over here is having an emotional reaction, that's their emotional reaction. There's no right or wrong to it. And what sometimes we like to do is we like to jump in their bubble and help them solve it. And what you want to do is you want to kind of stay in your own bubble and say, I see that I recognize that you're feeling frustrated. And I hear you when you say, like, I just can't do this spreadsheet. I don't have enough knowledge. Acknowledge and validate the feelings. And sometimes that's powerful in itself, because again, we vent and we put things out there. And then when no one responds or says anything, then, why do we want to express our feelings another time, right? Well, nobody said anything. So acknowledging and validating. And then that way, as a leader, you're still kind of in your space. They're having their emotions. Acknowledging and validating can be enough to literally just kind of calm people down. Like, oh, yes, I am frustrated. You're right. Because I don't know, I don't have enough knowledge to do this. Is that being heard. So I think, again, teaching leaders, like, you don't have to jump in everybody's bubble. If somebody's crying and you're uncomfortable with it, you don't have to, oh, it's okay. You don't have to run over there and try to soothe them. It's like, I understand this is a very upsetting situation. I can see why you might be feeling sad or overwhelmed, and just really try to connect in with them. And that enough can just kind of calm a situation down. It's pretty amazing. It's kind of magic the way it can work.
Well, we're coming to the end of our interview again. It's gone really quick. Is there anything else that you want to add to this topic? Because it seems so interesting and really useful to leaders out there.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I would just kind of add in that ties in so nicely with emotional intelligence is the whole concept of mindfulness. And mindfulness is all about being in the present and being aware. And so, that's another thing, like more and more people are learning about mindfulness and what that means. Being aware of sounds and things happening in front of us, or how people might be feeling, ties in really nicely with emotional intelligence. So that's another skill and another area that I talk to leaders about, is just learning mindfulness techniques, because the more you can just kind of be present, you're more open to seeing emotions happening in others and experiencing them in yourself. So much to talk about.
I know, I was just going to say, does that cover things like meditation and self-awareness, or?
Yes. Oh, totally. Yeah. The whole mindfulness thing is really about being in the moment and being present. And when we're able to do that, we're more aware. Again, we're more aware of what's happening, what we're feeling. We're aware of what's going on around us. And so just taking that time to just say, whew, okay, let me take a couple deep breaths. let me just like sit quietly for a minute and just think about the situation, we're better equipped to handle when big emotions come up. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming back and being a guest again. It's been an absolute pleasure. Would you like to just give everybody a quick overview of where they can find you on the internet? As usual, we will put this all below, but if you want to give them a quick overview, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you so much. So my leadership work, my website is Dr. Barb Hewson, and my last name is Hughson. So you'll see that in the link. So drbarbhewson.com is my leadership stuff. And then for mediation services, I have a website called Court Parent Class. I do a lot of court related work with parents going through the divorce or family law issues. So for conflict and mediation, parent coaching, things like that, they can find me there. So thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you very much for coming on again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. We'll see you again.